There's a quiet exodus happening right now, and almost nobody in the Western media is talking about it. Thousands of men over 50, from the US, the UK, Germany, Australia, men who spent their entire lives building careers, paying into pensions, playing by every rule their countries gave them, are packing one suitcase, closing the door on everything they built, and getting on a one-way flight to the Philippines. Not for a vacation, not for 2 weeks of sun before flying home to the gray skies and the grinding cost of living. For good. And if you think this is some small, random trend, some midlife crisis dressed up as a relocation story, you're wrong. As of last year, the Philippine Retirement Authority had roughly 60,000 active retirement visa holders on its books. Men and women from China, South Korea, India, the United States. All of them choosing this archipelago as the place they intend to spend the rest of their lives. 60,000. That number has been climbing for years, and in 2025, the government didn't slow the program down. It expanded it, lowered the entry age, made it easier, not harder, for foreigners to come and stay. So ask yourself the obvious question. Why here? Why this country, with everything it supposedly lacks compared to the wealthy nations these men are leaving behind? Stick with me for the next 10 minutes, because by the end of this, you'll understand something most people never figure out until they've already lost the best years of their life chasing comfort in the wrong place. The Philippines isn't being chosen because it's cheap. It's being chosen because it's the last place on Earth where a tired man can feel like a human being again. Let's start with the part nobody wants to say out loud because it sounds harsh until you've lived it. In a lot of the West right now, getting old alone is treated as a logistics problem. You retire, your kids are scattered across 3 different states or 3 different countries, your friends are dying off one by one, and the system hands you a pension check and basically tells you, good luck. Loneliness among older men in wealthy countries isn't a rumor. It's a documented epidemic. And it's one of the quiet reasons behind rising rates of depression and even suicide in men over 60. Nobody talks about that on the morning news, but men feel it. They feel the silence in an empty house. They feel what it's like to sit in a doctor's waiting room and realize the person checking your blood pressure barely makes eye contact with you. And then, often almost by accident, through a forum post, a friend who already made the move, a documentary at 2 in the morning, they discover something that genuinely shocks them. In the Philippines, an older man isn't invisible. He's respected. There's a word here, po, a small syllable tacked onto the end of a sentence, and it represents an entire culture built around respect for elders that the West simply doesn't have an equivalent for anymore. Walk into a sari-sari store in Cebu, sit down at a carinderia in Davao, and watch how people who don't even know your name will call you Tito, uncle, with genuine warmth, not pity. That single shift, being seen instead of tolerated, is the first domino that falls for almost every man who eventually decides to stay for good. Then there's the money, and I want to be precise here because the internet loves to exaggerate this part. The Philippines isn't a fantasy land where $100 buys a mansion, but the math is still brutal in the best possible way for someone retiring on a Western pension or savings. A modest condo in a city like Davao or Iloilo, fully furnished, in a secure building, can run a fraction of what the same square footage costs in Sydney or San Francisco. Fresh seafood at a wet market, mangoes that actually taste like something, a full meal at a local carinderia, these aren't luxuries reserved for the wealthy, they're just Tuesday. And the retirement visa system itself, the SRRV, was built specifically to make this transition smooth. Pay a refundable deposit into an accredited bank, and depending on your age and pension status, You get indefinite stay, multiple entry privileges so you can leave and come back without reapplying for anything, tax exemptions on your foreign pension income, and a one-time duty-free allowance to bring your life's belongings into the country. The government tightened some of the rules in late 2025, raised some deposit requirements, added more documentation for certain nationalities, but here's the part that matters. They didn't shut the door, they widened it. They lowered the minimum age to 40. That's not the behavior of a country trying to keep foreigners out. That's the behavior of a country that has figured out exactly what it's offering the world and exactly who wants it. But if you stop the story at money and weather, you're missing the actual heart of it. And this is where most Western coverage of this trend completely fails. They'll show you the beach, they'll show you the cheap beer, and they'll frame the whole thing as some kind of escape, almost shameful, like these men ran away from responsibility. That's not what's happening on the ground, and any of them will tell you that to your face. What they found instead was a culture where family isn't an obligation. It's the entire operating system of daily life. Multiple generations under one roof isn't a sign of failure here, it's the default. It's normal. It's actually expected. And there's a phrase, bahala na, that gets mistranslated constantly by outsiders as some kind of fatalistic shrug, when really it carries something closer to a deep, almost spiritual trust, an acceptance that things will work out because community will carry you when they don't. For a man who spent 30 years in a system that taught him independence above everything, that taught him to never need anyone, stepping into a culture built around interdependence is disorienting at first, and then it's the thing he can't imagine living without. He gets invited to a neighbor's birthday party he's never met before. He gets handed a plate of food at a fiesta by someone who has no idea what his name is yet. He starts learning words in Tagalog or Bisaya not because he has to, but because people light up when he tries. And that warmth, that genuine, unforced warmth, is something he hasn't felt directed at him in years. There's also something happening here that runs deeper than lifestyle, something closer to identity. The Philippines carries a complicated, layered history. 300 years under Spain, decades under American rule, a brutal occupation under Japan, and through all of it, something distinctly Filipino never got erased. It just absorbed everything thrown at it and turned it into something uniquely its own. That resilience isn't a tourism slogan. It's visible in how people rebuild after every single typhoon, how communities pull together during crisis without waiting for permission from anyone above them, how a country that's been tested over and over again still produces some of the warmest, most hospitable people on the planet. For a foreign man who grew up in a culture obsessed with individual achievement, watching that kind of communal strength up close changes something in him. He starts to understand why so many Filipinos abroad, in Dubai, in Riyadh, in Los Angeles, in London, send money home every single month without complaint. Why family back home isn't a burden to them, it's the entire point of everything they're doing overseas. He starts to understand why this small archipelago nation, despite everything stacked against it on paper, keeps producing people who carry themselves with a kind of quiet, unshakable pride. And eventually, he stops seeing himself as a tourist watching that from the outside. He starts wanting to be part of it. So when you ask why 50, 60, 70-year-old men from wealthy countries are choosing to spend their final decades in the Philippines instead of in the comfort of the nations that raised them, the honest answer isn't about escaping anything. It's about finding something most of them didn't even know they'd lost. Respect that doesn't come with an expiration date. Community that doesn't require a scheduled phone call. A culture old enough and strong enough to have survived empires, and still warm enough to pull a stranger in and call him Tito on his very first week. The numbers, the visas, the cost of living, those are just the surface. The real story is that thousands of men are discovering, often far later than they wish they had, that the good life was never about how much you accumulate. It's about how many people genuinely want you at their table. And right now, the Philippines is setting more tables for foreign men than almost anywhere else on Earth. If this kind of story means something to you, stay with this channel because we're just getting started on what this country represents to the rest of the world.